Dear colleagues, let's welcome Volodymyr Likutin. He was so nice to wait till the previous speakers give a word to him. So now we welcome Volodymyr. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. After listening to all previous speakers in the format in which it was presented, I feel that I will be speaking in a from a different perspective, because the business that I do, it is very different from the accepted business models as a bureau. I mean, I exploit people which freelancers won't like, definitely. For example, well, I give them job, but freelancers, they won't like it anyway. And at the end, I decided not to use services of people who are translators. This is not some special restriction. I mean, if a person has got a diploma in translation, but it just happened this way. At the end, in our company, we do not have any people who have degrees in translations. We have linguists, we have technical specialists, but there are no translators. And now I can tell about my bureau as a bureau where there are no translators, also as a competitive advantage, as a marketing element. Okay, how do I switch between slides? Okay, sorry. I will tell you about 3 components of my speech. First of all, I will just tell you my story in the format of a concept of a small translation agency. I say that I have a micro business. It is in top 20 biggest translation agencies, if we believe Konstantin Dranch. Anyway, maybe I'm smaller 10 times than the leader of the industry, but all our translation agencies, they are micro businesses. And if I had no information like this, I would think that I have a really small company. But in fact, all translation bureaus are small companies. So I will tell about advantages and disadvantages in working with non-translators. And at the end, I will say a few words about marketing. So the turning point in my life was like this. This is what it looked like, right? So it all started So you made a turn here, and what was the end point? The end point was okay. This is my inspiration, actually. It all started from myself having no linguistic or translation education. I'm a material scientist. I did some part-time jobs as translator. Then it turned out that I do translations well. So I went to a translation agency with very serious name, and I mostly stayed in the corridor. I talked to a manager who gave my salary and sometimes some source text which were printed. And I always thought that behind the door is this big translation agency. There is a director in a big armchair. He is asking for coffee, and the secretary is bringing coffee. There are editors, there are proofreaders, the processes are going on, there are many books and dictionaries there, and At the end, I was actually invited to work as a manager there. I opened the door and there was a toilet there. This was actually the only room in the premises of this translation bureau. So the manager or the secretary, I don't know who it was, both director and founder and manager, it was actually what this translation bureau was about. This was behind the magic door. And this was my mistake. I started from working with that bureau, so it was a big impression for me. Let's define some disputable definitions that there are translation agency and bureaus. Bureaus are companies which bring added value. They have at least one editor, he added something, there is some quality assurance. And the translation agency is just when the manager gets the translation and sends it to clients. There are many companies like this. Maybe not so many now, but about 7 years ago, when it all started, there were many companies of this kind. So the formula of success was like this, but in reality it was like this. After working with this translation bureau, I realized that I can open my own bureau with quite a different concept. Actually taking all the good things and just forgetting about all the other things. The Pareto principle and Occam razor about cutting all things you don't need. I realized that about 50% of the agency in this case came from technical translations. And about 5% of time and effort of this company staff went to these technical translators. And 95% of time and effort of managers working in this company. And this company or any other companies which I saw, they went to working with some certificates, working with private individuals. They required a lot of effort. Even if you spend 10 times, it's a lot anyway. And if it is just an agency which sends the translation to the customer, it requires just seconds per page. So I had this idea that I can have my own bureau and be my self-manager. It is like the freelance concept, but I just positioned myself as a bureau. For an agency, the minimum viable product, this is a startup term. Just one person is enough to be a full-functioning agency. And the most important thing, the quality of such translation in the area. And we are not talking about accessibility and everything, but just the quality will not be different from industry leaders, because any agency, anyway, there will be one translator translating the text, working on it. If we are talking about translation bureau with the several stages, translation, editing, proofreading, DTP, even in the biggest translation bureau, no more people will work on a page of translation. So minimum viable product, and the quality can be really unprecedented here, not worse than for any other translation bureau. 4 people are enough, not for every person, not for every language pair, but especially for certain projects. And so, when I realized that I've got a team of an agency and a good translator, I had to sell the product. I think that you can see my bureau from the very beginning. I did not know that these are apples, as you can see. I did not know about the in-text
And we have different companies in our request. So it's a different topic for discussion, but changing the positioning of the agency, it was very easy to get into the influence field. Any translation agency which could be found on request translation agency meant that 40% of all languages, and they said that it was the extremely high quality notarial certification. So a potential client sees hundreds of agencies and which are in practice are not different at all. So when a person finds an agency for technical translations which says that we are engineers and we are translating engineering documentation, so that was how I started to sell my services. So as to find my clients, I use the concept of guerrilla positioning. According to the book Marketing Wars, which refers to Clausewitz works, you can win only in one scenario. If you are going in one direction, you should be stronger in something at least. So there where you are stronger, you can succeed. If you're a small agency, why should you compete with a giant? Why should you provide a whole range of services if you have tens of other agencies and some of them are so huge and successful in providing so successful services that you have no chances at all? Of course you can move in this direction, but trying to get into in the weakest link was very easy for me. I think that a small nuance was neglected. I developed my agency for 6 years from the scratch without investing a penny. I didn't have any business angels, didn't get any loans, I didn't invest my own resources. So I also didn't have any financial or economic or linguistic education at that. But now I am one of the 20 best agencies in Ukraine according to Konstantin Dranch. And I had to filter out what we were doing in our agency and our clients we were orientating on. So if we take someone in particular, what is a wrong client in my concept? Full language support. That's great for a huge agency. For a small agency, this is a lose-lose strategy, because you can always find someone who will do it cheaper, more effective, with better resources, and the right client wants everything, wants good quality translation. If we talking about minimum economically viable products, which takes 4 people, at most we can provide quality translation even in a small agency, and if it's only one person, though, you can work here. It's rather cheap and good. Company is not on only what we see on the requests, but it's also a person who makes decisions. If we admit here secretaries with humanitarian education who do not understand engineers, or staff interpreters who has humanitarian linguistic education, it's very hard to explain to them that we can do it better. No, we're not offending those. It's just is missing in my concept. What about a starting translator? And the sales department is also a completely different situation. As far as the staff interpreter is concerned, I saw a request on the Facebook that a company within Rose Atom required a translator who would translate from English to Russian about IS. And the main requirement was that the person needed the translator's education. There were many freelancers who said, I'm very well versed in this topic, but I don't have such education. Are you interested in my offer? And they said no. So if we have a secretary with humanitarian education, this person will go in the wrong direction. But we have an engineer who fears by the engineering illiteracy of the translator. We've been discussing this many a time, and they said, yes, we can do this without any tests, but you provide this service 2 times more expensive. And they said, yes, we want you and you only. And I'm not joking here. I believe that a translator with good experience, of course, can do this not worse than an engineer. But I think we should keep within certain budget. Another variant is a head of the company who doesn't understand these requirements, that such translator could be more efficient in translating such documentation. So we can see as follows. Marketing of a specialized translation agency. Possibility to offer unique selling proposition. They can communicate at exhibitions. I received many orders and projects when I visited exhibitions and communicated with engineers who were working there. For example, we got a very good order from Marieva, and then Schneider got it. And I thought it would be for long time. Also, I should mention that the technical translation is very important for many agencies, but in an attempt to compete in the internet on the requests, I became popular agency from scratch. I didn't understand what I was doing, but I was among the first 3 agencies on the requests. It was very difficult to promote my site on the request a translation agency, but if we put it as a technical translation, then it's much better. The competition for technical translation was not that great, because, however, many companies have a very large share of technical translation in their services. So, going back on that, I told you that we visited exhibitions and I promoted a web page on the internet. I promoted a site and I got there 100% of my customers. Also, I proposed free translations, and we provided 20 pages of text free of charge. I was so sure of the concept that it will work that we provided 20 pages for free to get our customers. We're not doing this for 5 years at least. That was the case for the first several years. I don't know whether I compensated these costs. I think about 10 customers used this offer, not because they didn't like it, but because I believe that they had a translator who used these services and capitalized on these. For me, it was important that as a freelancer, rather as a hired force for a translation agency, I work for 15 hryvnias, but here I can get 50. For one customer, I have orders for 200 pages, and that compensates for 8 other customers who discontinued their services. That was at the start of my operations. These are very simple things. Also, I practice paying on request, on receipt of the invoice. So I provide these kind of services, and this concept failed only 3 times. I think that the orders that were received as the result of such actions, which overweighted my chances to get orders, were smaller, but it's hard to estimate this. And a short resume summary for the first part. It's uncompromising quality. You can get that even in a small agency with 3 or 4 people. And you minimize your costs because managing an agency with 50 people who are doing 2 or 3,000 pages, the management here can be provided by 2 people. Whether with certificate, as far as certificates or translations into different languages is concerned, if you have 8 different language pairs, you have 80 correctors, 80 proofreaders, and you have a lot of stuff there for only 100 pages of orders. Here we have a smaller number of translators which are administered by 1 person. Minimized risks. If you are well versed in this topic, you are not trying to translate into Chinese and providing what you cannot see. It can always cause problems with quality. You can track that and you can lose a certain big part of other orders, but you can succeed in one direction and have no risks at all. And the controversial part here, a translator and an engineer. For example, I provided a phrase here, and when they say that it's very important to understand language here, this is the case for these situations. According to the speaker asked to say that the translation of these phrases is not possible because of technical reasons. I have a very trivial question here. A phrase that is out of context and without the definition of abbreviations is not a very good example to describe a technical translator which is not competent in this task. I partly agree with you and I partly say that this is the case in orders.
If it's a translation of a certain range of products, this is one thing. But if we are talking about vendor documents, just 1,000 pages to be translated, there may be anything, and the customer sometimes does not know what is there. But the technical documents, there is a quality that terms and abbreviations, there are definitions. No, I won't agree. I have experience in translation and editing, and I did a lot of technical documents, so I won't agree. It is really rare when there are definitions and a special glossary, but you can find the concept in context. Yeah, well, we can search for a certain term, but I understand what is said here. The question is that the engineer can understand what this or that abbreviation means, but for a translator, if he does not understand what is going on, there are certain nuances. If there is a very specific term, you can look into dictionaries, but you don't really get what is going on. And if, for example, a specific terminology is used, like really silly things can be said about bringing oil into a transformator. But I think this is what we were talking at the previous session. This is not a question of translator or non-translator, a diploma or education. This is a question of knowledge and attitude to your work. I used to read some materials about relay security, and I understand certain things And a translator who actually does any translators, people should understand these are some basic things. I just have a look at the sentence and I see it, though I don't have neither humanitarian or technical education. And people just don't know how the things work. And the things which you mentioned, even after high school, people should realize what you're talking about. I will reply, we're talking about economically viable translators. A good translator, even without technical education, of course, he can translate things well, but it will cost 10 times more. At the same time, if we compare him to an engineer, let's say low-cost engineer and low-cost translator, the engineer will not write some nonsense. And you know what I mean, Vladimir, but I have several questions. Okay, may I continue if possible? Here, I have it written. Business is the ability to make a product at a competitive price. So it is always possible to make a good translation, but the problem of a bureau, even a small one, is to make a good quality translation, to keep all parties satisfied. For example, there is a person in the Academy of Science and he needs money, he needs a job. You give him this job and he's happy to take this job. You're happy, he is happy, you get good quality product and you can sell it. But if we take a freelancer who takes 10 euro, a proofreader, an editor for +5, +3 euro, you have administrative costs and you have to sell it for 30 euro. And this is another market. This is another level of competition. You can't sell it in Ukraine for 30 euro because people tell you it's maximum 30 hryvnias or maybe 100 hryvnias. This topic is disputable, of course. A portrait of a freelancer translator. First, for a freelancer, as we told, freelancer is business. It is a small business, and you have to compete for such a person with everybody, with the Western agencies, with the big Russian agencies. People have their risks, and this is just not my target audience. This is his method of making business. Many freelancers or translators, they perceive working with translation bureaus just as some side job, and they say that you don't pay big money, so what do you want from us? Also, professional translators who work initially with translations, they value time in terms that they often have some time to perform translation. There are professionals who work and spend as much time as it is needed, but I'm talking about some middle-class translators. And an important aspect for me is focus on literacy. And I often had examples that they are not trying to understand the content deeply, and they focus on making the text readable, making it look good. It is kind of an illusion of good translation. And where is now the person who told it? It's vice versa. I don't know. You will tell me later, okay? This agency is not working anymore. Is it closed? Yes, because this approach is not reasonable. Let's say, if I was still working as a translator, at some point before the crisis, my personal profit was $6,500. I think that for me it is rather profitable. Yes, it's a good profit, of course. When will be time for questions? I'm afraid that considering that there won't be time either for my speech or for questions. Okay, so can we do maybe questions? Another thing I wanted to tell you, a translator is not a potential user of the service. He does the product not really understanding why this product is needed, as opposed to an engineer. He understands his work in a different way. An engineer, myself, for example, I used to work in the Academy of Science. I understand what the scientific article should look like. And I understand that I can do it as I would do it for myself. And the translator have a different focus. He does not know how this product will be used further. And the non-engineer does not understand how the documents of technological processes will be used. As opposed to him, an engineer is a potential user of the product, at least a good engineer. And an engineer is focused on the result, not on the time spent for translation, but on getting a good product. I'm an engineer and I did translation, I did editing, and now I manage quality, so I can say it. Also focus on the terminology. If we take an engineer who is not good in writing, and maybe he can make some mistakes, he does not have style, but if he is a good engineer and a good translator, he tries to focus on the content. He will not write some nonsense. It will not be an illusion of good translation. And you can still use a proofreader and correct the mistakes. It's better than taking an illusion of good translation and editing, because even after this editing, it may require doing this job from the beginning, because the person does not understand what he's writing about. The same thing with machine translation. Okay, we're running out of time, as I understand. I think that my time was from 6:20 and I had 40 minutes. Okay, I will just add then. I will add one thing I wanted to say, that the first concept with which I worked, very simple, is a value for money. Our clients were really happy because they knew there were some mistakes. I mean, maybe some lack of style and some things where they were talking to me, some repetitions or something, but there was no nonsense, and clients really appreciated it. Now, several times we had situations when translation from a real professional translator was accepted, when there was a good translation, but the assessment of quality was lower, though it was easy to correct it just with a good proofreader. But now we changed the concept, we changed our approach, and we improved the quality. We just worked on readability, on the style of our text, and on the grammar of our translations. And we work on a different market. I have other things to tell you, but this is the end, so thank you. We have many other questions, but unfortunately we don't have time. The phrase that you mentioned, it was said that the speaker asked conference interpreters not to translate the phrase, but I actually did ask the conference interpreter to tell us